My name is Rowan Hale, 21 years old. When I think about the day everything started to fall apart, it always begins with my father's death. I was 15, then old enough to understand loss, but too young to carry the weight of what came after. He had been the anchor of our home, the soft-spoken presence who made everything feel safe, predictable, whole. After he passed, the house fell into a strange kind of silence, a hollow version of itself. His aftershave still lingered in the hallway, the leather of his chair still held the imprint of his form by the fireplace, and every room felt like it was waiting for him to walk back in. My mom didn't talk much during that time. She kept herself busy with errands and chores that didn't really need doing, as if constant motion could keep the grief from settling on her shoulders. At first, I thought it was just her way of coping. I tried to respect her space while learning how to navigate a world suddenly missing its center. But less than 6 months later, she walked into the kitchen one morning with a different light in her eyes and said almost casually, "I've been seeing someone." My spoon froze halfway to my mouth. Someone. Enter Dan, loud, messy, unemployed Dan. The polar opposite of my father, who was the type of man who kept paperwork neatly filed for 10 years and knew exactly where every tool belonged. Dan was the type to leave soda cans on counters and call it organized chaos, the kind of guy who thought his charm made up for his lack of stability. And somehow my mom believed it. Before I had time to process that she was dating again, they were married. Just like that, a courthouse wedding. No family, no conversation, no transition. One day it was just me and Mom navigating quiet grief, and the next, Dan and his 2 kids, Lily and Kyle, marched into the house like they'd been living there their whole lives. From the moment they arrived, I felt the ground shift beneath my feet. The first time Lily walked in, she scanned the living room with a wrinkle in her nose, like she was judging whether it met her standards. She carried an attitude that floated around her like perfume, entitlement, superiority, annoyance. Kyle, younger, but no less arrogant, mirrored her every move. They weren't shy about making it clear I wasn't part of their picture. Dan, though, was the worst. He plopped himself into my dad's leather chair, the one sacred thing left untouched, and leaned back with his hands behind his head like he owned the place. "Hey, kid," he said once. "Grab me a soda, will you?" And put the game on. Kid. I can still hear Mom's voice in the background saying, "He's trying to make this a family." But that wasn't family. That was intrusion wrapped in artificial courtesy. Week by week, pieces of my dad disappeared from the house. His tools in the garage, pushed aside to make space for Dan's random piles of junk. The mug Dad always used, replaced with one of Dan's tacky, oversized novelty cups, the kind you'd win at a fair. His chair, Dan claimed it as his spot. But the worst blow came the day I saw that the wedding photo of my parents was gone from the living room mantel. In its place was a picture of my mom and Dan in their rushed courthouse wedding. "Where's Dad's photo?" I asked her later. She didn't even look up from her phone. "We're making new memories," she said, as if that explained everything. I walked away before she saw how much it stung. Lily and Kyle weren't any better. Lily blasted music through the house like she believed every speaker on earth belonged to her. Kyle left messes like it was a sport. And any time I tried to assert myself even a little, they dismissed me. One night, they were having one of their loud movie marathons. I had an exam the next morning and asked if they could turn it down. "You can study in your room," Lily said, barely looking away from the screen. "This is my house too," I snapped back. She didn't miss a beat. "This isn't your house. It's our home now. Deal with it." Our home. My blood went cold. I walked straight to my mom, hoping, just hoping, she'd finally take my side. She didn't. "You're being selfish," she said. "They're part of the family now. You need to adjust." Adjust. To losing every trace of my father. To strangers walking through the house like kings. To being an outsider in the place where I grew up. When I told her I didn't feel like I belonged there anymore, she let out a frustrated sigh and said, "Maybe it's best if you stayed with your grandparents for a while." That was all it took. No argument. No hesitation. Just an easy way to remove me from the picture so Dan and his kids could settle in more comfortably. I packed that night. My grandparents welcomed me with open arms, my grandmother hugging me so tightly I could finally breathe again. My grandpa joking that at least someone would appreciate his long-winded stories. Their house felt warm in a way mine hadn't in years. But even as I settled into their spare room, there was a quiet anger burning under my ribs, a sense of betrayal I couldn't shake. My mom thought she'd cleared the board. Dan thought he had won. Lily and Kyle thought they'd taken my place. But they were wrong, because while they played house in the shadow of my father's memory, I remembered something they didn't know. The house legally belonged to me. Every wall, Every board, every inch of the place they treated like their kingdom. In 6 years, when I turned 21, it would all be mine. And when that day came, the balance of power would shift. They just didn't know it yet. My grandparents' house became the calm I didn't realize I'd been starving for. The first night I slept there, I didn't dream of slammed doors or raised voices or Dan's feet kicked up on my dad's chair. Instead, I woke to the smell of my grandmother's jasmine tea and my grandfather humming off key while fixing something in the garage. Their home felt lived and warm, steady. Everything my own house had stopped being long before my mom asked me to leave. They didn't ask many questions. Maybe they already knew everything they needed to. Maybe they'd seen it coming before I had. When I walked through their door with nothing but a duffel bag and bruised pride, they didn't pry. They didn't judge. They didn't say I told you so. They simply made space for me, as if I'd always belonged there. My grandfather said, "You're safe here, Rowan." And for the first time in years, I believed something an adult told me. Still, there was a dull ache inside me, one that came from knowing my mom had chosen Dan and his kids over her own son. Even when I tried to shrug it off, the thought lingered like a splinter under the skin. But the guilt wasn't mine to carry. A week after I moved in, my mom called with her usual manufactured cheerfulness, as if nothing earth-shattering had happened. She acted like she'd sent me on a little vacation instead of kicking me out of the only home I'd ever known. "Oh, Dan installed a new shelf in the garage today," she said once, excitement in her voice. I almost laughed. Installed more like shove things around until they formed a vaguely horizontal line. Another time Lily cooked dinner last night. It was so sweet. The picture she painted was perfect. Too perfect. A forced harmony I knew couldn't possibly be real. And every call felt like another reminder that I'd been erased, swept out to make room for her shiny new family. But the worst call, the one that changed everything, came a month later. Mom didn't bother with small talk. Not this time. So Dan and I were thinking. My stomach dropped. Nothing good ever followed those words. "It might be a good idea," she continued, "if you gave one of the properties your dad left you to Dan." I stared at the wall, gripping my phone so tightly my fingers ached. "You want me," I said slowly, "to give Dan one of Dad's properties?" "Just one," she added quickly, as if that made it reasonable. "It would really help him feel like part of the family." Part of the family. I felt something inside me snap. "Mom," I said carefully, "those properties are my future. They're what Dad wanted me to have." She sighed, sharp, irritated, dismissive. "Dan is trying so hard to make this family work. This could bring us closer." Bring us closer. She'd kicked me out for him. What else did she want me to sacrifice? "Absolutely not," I said. The silence that followed was cold enough to freeze bone. "You need to think about what's best for everyone," she said before hanging up. "Not just yourself." That line echoed in my head for days. What's best for everyone? Everyone but me. After that, I stopped answering her calls altogether. My grandparents didn't push me to reconnect. They just gave me space to breathe. My grandmother would slip snacks into my backpack like I was still 10 years old, and my grandfather found excuses to keep me busy in the garage, teaching me how to wrap wires properly, showing me the right way to sandwood, telling stories I'd heard a dozen times but listened to anyway. With them, I felt seen, not tolerated, not replaced, not inconvenient. School became a refuge, too. Hanging out with friends who actually wanted me there, throwing myself into studying it all, helped drown out the noise from my old house. But the calls didn't stop. Voicemail after voicemail from Mom, trying to guilt me back into her orbit. "I miss you. Why don't you come over this weekend? Dan's making his famous chili." "You're being unfair, Rowan. You can't ignore me forever." Other relatives chimed in too, each offering their unsolicited wisdom. "You need to forgive your mom," one aunt said. "She's doing her best," another insisted. Family is family, an uncle lectured. Not one of them had reached out the day I was kicked out. Not one offered a place to stay. Family is family, sure, until they're inconvenienced. Still underneath all the frustration, one truth kept me grounded. When I turned 21, everything my dad left me would legally be mine. The house, the properties, the savings, all of it. Dan and his kids might have felt comfortable, all too comfortable, but they were building their kingdom on borrowed land, and the clock was ticking even if they refused to hear it. So I prepared quietly. I researched renovation ideas, looked at rental prices, saved money, studied my father's notes, the ones he left scattered in old binders marked future planning. I trained myself to be ready when the time came. One evening, my grandpa caught me looking at a renovation catalog. He didn't say much, just nodded, tapping the arm of his chair. "You're planning ahead," he said softly. "Your dad would be proud of that." For a second, I had to swallow down the lump in my throat. Dad had always planned everything with an eye toward my future, and I knew deep in my chest that honoring him meant not letting anyone, especially Dan, rewrite the life he'd tried so hard to protect for me. So I waited. I waited while my mother pretended everything was fine. I waited while Dan grew bolder and lazier. I waited as Lily and Kyle carved out space in my old home. I waited while the house I grew up in became a place I didn't recognize. But waiting didn't mean surrendering. It meant preparing. Because one day soon they would learn the truth they'd never bothered to ask. The house was never theirs. It had always been mine, and I was coming back for it. The morning I turned 21, I didn't wake up feeling older. I didn't feel wiser or different or suddenly transformed. I just felt ready. It was the kind of readiness that grows quietly like a tree root pushing through concrete. Slow, patient. I had waited 6 years for this 6 years of being pushed out, erased, forgotten. 6 years of watching from a distance while Dan sat in my father's chair, while Lily and Kyle paced through the house like its rightful heirs, while my mother insisted that we were making new memories. But the truth was simple. Everything my father left now legally belonged to me. No more waiting, no more pretending, no more swallowing anger to keep the peace. My father had built that house with long hours, sweat, and stubborn dreams. He had signed every document with the intention of protecting my future. And now finally that future was in my hands. Not Dan's, not Lily's, not Kyle's, not my mother's. Mine. I didn't throw a party. I didn't celebrate. I didn't even tell my grandparents until later that day. Instead, I called my mother. It wasn't out of spite. It was a courtesy. The last courtesy I was ever willing to give. "Hey, Mom," I said, keeping my voice neutral. "Just wanted to let you know I've decided to renovate the house." Silence. Not the confused kind. The kind where someone realizes the floor under them is beginning to crack. Finally, she managed. "What do you mean renovate?" I said slowly, "I'm getting the house ready to rent out. It's officially mine now. I'm moving forward with the plans I've been making." Her breath hitched. I could picture her standing in the kitchen, hand gripping the counter, eyes darting around the room like the walls might have answers. "This is our home," she protested. "How can you just kick us out?" I almost laughed. The hypocrisy was too thick to swallow. "You mean my home," I corrected. "The one you kicked me out of years ago so Dan and his kids could settle in comfortably." She scoffed. "Don't be dramatic. You're always welcome here. This isn't about that. It's about family. Dan and I have worked hard to make this a home built on what I asked. Free rent. My dad's money. My space." Her voice cracked, the anger bleeding into panic. "You can't just do this." "I can," I said. "And I am. You have 2 weeks to leave." She tried arguing, tried guilt-tripping, tried everything except acknowledging what she'd done. I hung up before she finished her latest excuse. And then I made the call that would change everything. The locksmith. 2 days later, the locks were replaced, and I held every new key in my hand. My heart thudded in my chest as I pocketed them. It wasn't joy, it wasn't revenge, it was justice. A quiet correction of a long-standing wrong. I expected resistance, of course, but nothing prepared me for the sheer spectacle of denial that followed. The day they returned from a weekend trip, my phone erupted with calls. First from Mom, screaming, crying, accusing. Then from Dan, trying to sound intimidating but coming off like a toddler denied a toy. Then from unknown numbers, probably Lily or Kyle. I didn't answer any of them. I sent one text, "You have 2 weeks to move out. That's more than fair." What followed was the longest, most absurd 2 weeks of my life. By day 4, I drove past the house. Not a single box, not a single trash bag, not a single sign of packing. They were sitting around like nothing had changed. I confronted my mother that evening. "You haven't started packing." She gave me that condescending smile she used whenever she thought she could manipulate me. "We're getting everything in order," she said sweetly. "Transitions take time." "Time is exactly what you're running out of," I replied. "You've already wasted a week." "Oh, calm down," she scoffed. "We'll handle it." But they weren't handling anything. Day 13, one day before the deadline, I stopped by unannounced. The scene was surreal. My mom, Dan, and Lily were sitting on the couch watching TV like it was any other day. No boxes, no tape, no effort, nothing. "What the hell is going on?" I demanded. "You're supposed to be out tomorrow." Mom stood slowly, wearing the expression of someone rehearsing innocence. "We're trying," she said. "It's just, Lily's pregnancy has been difficult, and Dan's stressed. We just need a little more time." "No," I said firmly. "You've had 2 weeks." Dan stood up, puffing out his chest like he was preparing for a fight. How can you treat us like this after everything we've done for this family? I stared him down. Done what exactly? He opened his mouth, then closed it, then glared. Lily chimed in, hands on her belly like a prop. How can you be so heartless? Heartless, I said. Heartless was you telling me this wasn't my house. Heartless was sitting in my room while packing wasn't even on the table. Mom tried stepping between us. You're tearing this family apart. And that was when I snapped. No, I said. You did that the day you kicked me out. Tears filled her eyes. Dan muttered curses under his breath. Kyle lurked by the doorway, arms crossed, glaring like a child denied dessert. I'd seen enough. The final day arrived like a storm on the horizon. I pulled into the driveway early. A few boxes sat outside, but no moving truck. No real progress. Mom stormed out the front door. So you finally decide to show up, she snapped. I'm here to make sure you're actually leaving, I said. Looks like you haven't done much. We're working on it, she hissed. You don't understand how hard this is. What's hard to understand, I shot back. You had 2 weeks. You thought I'd cave. You thought I'd back down. You were wrong. Dan appeared behind her jaw, tight. You think you're a man now, throwing your family out? You're not my family, I said coldly, and you need to leave. He stepped closer, too close. Your dad would be ashamed of you. That hit something inside me, but not the way he expected. My dad, I said quietly, is the reason you're even standing in this house. Don't speak about him again. Lily waddled onto the porch, trembling with anger. You're heartless, Rowan. I'm realistic, I replied. Pack, or don't. Either way, you're leaving today. By noon, the movers arrived. By sunset, the house was empty. They stood on the porch, defeated, angry, resentful. You've really changed, my mom whispered. I don't recognize you anymore. I changed because I had to, I said. They left. The truck drove off. Silence settled over the house like dust. For the first time since my father died, I walked into the living room alone. The air felt different, heavy but clean, quiet but peaceful. This was no longer a place of grief, no longer a cage, no longer theirs. It was mine again. And this time, I wasn't letting anyone take it from me. For the first week after they left, I allowed myself to believe it was finally over. No more arguments, no more guilt trips, no more strangers occupying my father's house like they were entitled to it. I could finally breathe without the weight of their presence pressing on my chest. Renovations were underway. Contractors came and went, bringing life back into walls that had held too many years of resentment. I spent my days reviewing blueprints, picking paint samples, and walking through each room, imagining what it would look like once the chaos was stripped away, fresh, clean mine. But peace never comes easily with people who thrive on entitlement. About a week into the renovations, I got a text from my mom. Hey, just checking in. How's everything going with the renovations? No apologies, no acknowledgement of the years of damage. Just an innocent little hook baited and waiting. I stared at the message for a long minute. I knew exactly what she was doing. Testing the water, trying to see if I'd softened, if she could slip her way back in. Against my better judgment, I replied with a single word. Fine. It was a mistake. Within minutes, my phone lit up with her call. I let it go to voicemail. Later, when I played it, her voice dripped with false warmth layered over desperation. Hey, sweetie, I think we should talk. Dan's been having a hard time finding work, and Lily's pregnancy has been really stressful. We're all trying so hard, but it's been really tough without a stable place to stay. Maybe we can figure something out. Call me back. There it was, the real reason. Not concern, not reconciliation, not love. Need. Soon after Dan tried next. His number wasn't saved, but his voice was unmistakable, self-important, heavy with wounded pride. Look, kid, he said. Pretending this was a heartfelt moment, I know we've had our differences, but family is family. We're all human. We mess up. We just need a little help getting back on our feet. You can't expect us to do this alone. I almost laughed. You've had years to get on your feet, I said flatly when I answered. You chose not to. He tried again. Lily's pregnant. Kyle is stressed. We're struggling. You can't just leave us like this. Yes, I said, I can. And I hung up. Then Lily tried her hand. Her first message was soft, hesitant. Hey, I just wanted to say I'm sorry for everything. I didn't respond. The second message came an hour later. I'm really struggling with the pregnancy. Rowan. The stress is affecting me and the baby. If you could just let us stay for a little while, just until the baby is born, it would mean so much. She didn't mention the years she treated me like I was invisible. She didn't mention calling my home hers. She didn't mention shoving me out of my own life. Convenient how memory works when you need something. I ignored her too. A few days later, the situation escalated. My mom showed up in my grandparents' house unannounced. I was sitting at the kitchen table looking over flooring quotes when the knock came. My grandmother went to answer it, and I heard her polite but tight voice say, "Oh, hello." I knew it was my mother before I even saw her. She stepped into the kitchen looking frantic hair, unbrushed eyes red, clothes wrinkled. The picture of someone whose life had spun out of control. She scanned the room until her gaze landed on me. "Can we talk?" she asked with what she probably thought was a soft, motherly tone. I didn't move. "About what?" Her face crumpled theatrics, ready on cue. "I just want us to be a family again. Things have gotten so out of hand. I know you're angry, but we can fix this." "There's nothing to fix," I said. "You made your choices. Now you're living with them." She blinked at me, stunned that I wasn't folding. "But Lily's pregnant," she pleaded. "She needs stability. Dan's trying to find work. Kyle is—" "And I needed stability when you kicked me out," I cut in. "I needed a mother when the house stopped feeling like home. I needed boundaries when Dan moved in and started taking over. You didn't care about any of that." Her mouth opened and closed, searching for the right emotional weapon. "I'm still your mother," she whispered. "I did the best I could." "No," I said. "You did what was easiest. That's not the same." My grandparents exchanged a look, the kind that said they'd been waiting years for someone to tell her this truth. My grandmother stepped forward, firm but gentle. "I think it's time for you to leave," she said. My mother stiffened, eyes flashing. "You're going to regret this," she hissed at me. She stomped out the door. But she wasn't done. People like her never are. The final straw came a week later while I was at the house with the contractor discussing countertop materials. Dan's beat-up truck rolled into the driveway, sputtering, like it might fall apart at any second. My stomach dropped. My contractor paused mid-sentence, and out they came. Dan, my mother. Lily, hands on her belly like she was holding an Oscar-winning prop. They approached like they were staging an intervention. "You've got to be kidding me," I muttered. "We just want to talk," Dan said, holding up his hands like he was being civil. "There's nothing to discuss," I said. "This is trespassing." "We're desperate," my mom said, her voice cracking. "We've been staying with friends, but it's not working out. Please, Rowan, we need your help." "You mean you need me to give you back a house you ruined and disrespected?" I replied. "No." Lily started crying, instantly tears on demand. "Please, I don't know what else to do." Dan stepped closer, trying to regain dominance. "You're really going to turn your back on us after everything we've been through?" I met his stare. "Absolutely," I said. "You have 5 minutes to get off this property, or I'm calling the police." Their begging became frantic. Their tears became louder. Their tone became more desperate. But I didn't move. And eventually they did. They got back in the truck. They drove away. And that was the last time they tried to corner me. Through the grapevine, I heard they'd settled into a tiny apartment across town, cramped old. Nothing like the free luxury they'd enjoyed at my expense. And for the first time in a long time, I felt something close to peace. Not victory, not revenge, just peace. A clean break, a closed chapter. Or at least I thought it was closed. A few quiet weeks passed. Weeks filled with the sound of drills, the scrape of sanders, the thump of new flooring being laid down. With every update, every transformed corner of the house, I felt a piece of my life settling into place. For the first time since I was 15, I wasn't waiting for the other shoe to drop. I wasn't bracing for conflict. I wasn't just surviving. I was building something. So when my phone buzzed with a message from my mom, I almost ignored it. Almost. It wasn't like the others. No guilt, no pressure, no emotional hooks. Just, "Can we talk? I owe you an apology." I stared at the screen for a long time. My first instinct was to delete it. Block her. Move on. But something in the wording, simple, stripped of manipulation, made me pause. Curiosity nudged me. Against my better judgment, I agreed to meet. I chose a coffee shop near my grandparents' house, a public place. Neutral ground, somewhere she couldn't spiral into theatrics without people watching. When I walked in, she was already there, hunched over a cup of tea that had probably gone cold. She looked different. Not the polished version of herself she used to present. Not the defensive woman who insisted everything was fine. She looked tired eyes, swollen shoulders, slumped hands, trembling slightly as she held the cup. It was the look of someone who had finally realized the life she'd built was never as stable as she pretended. She started talking before I even sat down. "I need to apologize," she said, her voice cracking on the first word. "For everything." I stayed quiet. Words were cheap. I needed more than that. She took a deep breath. "I made a lot of mistakes, Rowan, and I didn't see it until now." I watched her closely. She didn't flinch away from my stare. She didn't shift into defensiveness. She didn't try to soften the blow with excuses. She continued, "Dan, he's not who I thought he was." She looked down, fingers twisting around each other. When we lost the house, she said quietly, he changed. Completely. The moment we didn't have stability, the moment the bills and responsibilities hit, he became someone else. Her voice trembled. He blamed me for everything. Losing the house, Lily's stress, not finding him a job, even Kyle's anger. He yelled at me constantly. He shut me out. He made me feel like everything was my fault. I felt something shift inside me. Not sympathy, not forgiveness, but understanding. A recognition of the toxic patterns I had long suspected but never seen laid bare. She took another shaky breath. I'm filing for divorce. I wasn't shocked. I had expected this, maybe even counted on it. Dan was never in love with her. He was in love with her stability, with what she could offer, with the house, with the comfort she never made him earn. She wiped at her eyes. I should have seen it sooner, she whispered. I should have listened to you. I should have protected you. Instead, I pushed you out, and I lost you. I don't blame you if you hate me. I don't hate you, I said quietly. But you did hurt me. She nodded, tears slipping down her cheeks. I know, she said, and I'm not asking you to forgive me now. I just want the chance to make things right, even if it takes time. I leaned back, letting her words settle. Part of me wanted to accept. Part of me wanted to walk away. Part of me didn't trust her. Still felt the ache of old wounds, still carried the memory of being told to stay with your grandparents for a while, like I was an inconvenience. You burned a lot of bridges, I said finally, and I'm still rebuilding my life. I don't have the space for more chaos. I understand. Her voice was nearly a whisper. I'm not asking for anything. I just wanted you to know that I'm sorry. She stood eventually, gathering herself, preparing to leave. Before she stepped away, she hesitated. I know you're renting the house out now, she said softly, but if you ever decide to live there again, I'd love to visit someday. Maybe things could be different. I shook my head calm and firm. The house isn't for us anymore, Mom, I said. It's for me to build whatever comes next. She swallowed hard, nodded, then left without looking back. Since then, the texts she sends are infrequent, simple updates, polite check-ins. I haven't responded. Not because I want to hurt her, but because healing requires boundaries. And sometimes boundaries look like silence. The renovations finished last week. When I walked through the completed house, something settled inside me like dust finally falling after years of chaos. Fresh paint, new floors, restored windows, a home reborn from the wreckage of what it had become. Every corner felt like a tribute to my father. Not because it looked the same, because it held the same intention. Hope, stability, purpose. I stood in the living room for a long while, sunlight pouring in through the windows, the air warm and still. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like a visitor. For the first time in years, the house felt peaceful. Not because it was loud with life, but because it was quiet with possibility. My father's presence didn't haunt the space anymore. It guided it. I didn't forgive my mother that day. Maybe I will someday. Maybe I won't. But I finally understood something. Forgiving someone doesn't mean letting them hurt you again. It means taking back the power they once had over you. And I was done giving my power away. Moving forward wasn't about erasing the past. It was about honoring the future my father imagined for me. A future rooted in strength, clarity, and self-respect. A future that finally belonged to me.